Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers as we take a look at last night's action, or at least look back at the Monday night game between the Saints and the Seahawks. New Orleans won in Seattle. They didn't cover. Also, we have World Series Game 1 coming up tonight in Houston between the Braves and the Astros. And also we'll take a look at the NBA card for tonight with 5 games in the league. And I got a great number on road favorites so far this season. It's pretty impressive. We'll get to that coming up in just a few moments. But first, before we get to all of that, I want to tell you about BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks and a great deal for new players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, for new players only. Must be 21 years or older, and it is legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. So let's get to it, right, with the Monday night game from last night as the Saints beat the Seahawks 13-10. Believe me, there wasn't a lot of points in that game. Pretty ugly game for both teams, in fact. And let's start with the Saints. So Alvin Kamara had a very good game for New Orleans last night. Even though he had only 51 yards on the ground, he had 128 yards receiving on 10 catches and a touchdown from Jameis Winston. Jameis was 19 of 35, didn't throw a pick, but threw for 222 yards. And you can argue that the Saints, winning the game 13-10, should have won that game probably 20-10. Now, DK Metcalf had that long touchdown catch from Geno Smith early from 84 yards out. The rest of the game, Geno Smith, you know how much he threw for? He threw for a grand total of 83 yards. So think about that for a second. Geno Smith threw for 84 yards on the first play to DK, or wasn't the first play of the game, but in that first 5 minutes, 84 yards. He had 83 yards the rest of the game. So Geno definitely has stalled this offense. And again, what are you supposed to do when Russell Wilson's your guy and he's out? But talking about the Saints, though, Jameis didn't make any mistakes as far as interceptions last night, but the issues are this. Number one, on the first drive, they had the field goal on. They had chances inside the 10, couldn't score. Then on the last drive, when it was 10-10, to maybe go up 17-10 for the Saints to cover, again, they had an inside run to Kamara that went nowhere. They just couldn't convert. You would have thought that Jameis would have made a play or two, and he didn't. I said 20-10. It could have been 21-10. You would have added 4 points onto each of those two drives. It would have been a 21-10 game. So the Saints played well last night. They barely got by the Seahawks, but I understand New Orleans has the look ahead factor with Tampa Bay coming up Sunday at the Superdome, but Seattle didn't play very well last night. They hung. They had one long touchdown and a field goal, and that was it. And Seattle's now 0-3 at home, which you never hear. I mean, Seattle barely loses 3 games a whole season at home, much less the first 3. They get Jacksonville coming up on Sunday, and the Seahawks are 3.5-point favorites in that game. I mean, who would have thought that'd be the case, that Jacksonville is that short of a favorite on the road coming up on Sunday? They're off the bye after picking up their first win in years, actually since last year, but it feels like years, over the Dolphins in London. So Jacksonville is short favorite against Seattle coming up on Sunday, and New Orleans, they are an underdog against Tampa Bay on Sunday at home as they are getting 5 points against New Orleans. So let us talk about now, before we get to the baseball, the news for Thursday night. And the Packers play the Cardinals out in Arizona. And the Cardinals right now, they are laying 6 at BetMGM. And obviously the big news on why this line moved is because Devontae Adams is questionable, the Packers' big receiver. he tested positive for COVID. Now, there is still a possibility he can play. He needs 2 negative tests within a 24-hour span over the next few days, and then he can play. And the defensive coordinator tested positive for COVID, so you don't know who else is dealing with it on Green Bay. But this total is at 53.5, and it's down to 51, and that's Aaron Rodgers' top target. And we've seen now 5 consecutive unders in these Thursday night games. The first 2 games went over. Cowboys, Bucks, easy. Washington and the Giants, and I've been very good with that. I've been very good with the football team, but I led with them, so I'll put $1 in the jar. But the football team and the Giants, they went over, and the last 5 have gone under. So you go through Panthers, Texans, Jags, Bengals, Rams, Seahawks, Bucks, Eagles, and then last week that debacle between the Browns and the Broncos. So does it turn around this week is a big question. Do you get that over? But now that total has dropped a little bit with Davante Adams possibly not playing for Green Bay. And we'll see what kind of magic Aaron Rodgers has with his other receivers. Obviously, the Cardinals, with Kyler Murray, you have DeAndre Hopkins. You would have had a great, 2 of the best receivers in all of football, not really opposing each other. I mean, they're playing on different sides. And, Davante does his thing against the Cardinals defense, and DeAndre Hopkins does it against the Packers defense. Everyone wants to say it's a pitcher's duel. Well, you're not pitching really against each other. I mean, in a sense, you're there, but you're not pitching to another guy that's batting. It's not like saying in basketball, LeBron is facing Steph Curry. When you have these situations in football with wide receivers, they're just on different sides. But regardless, so the Cardinals are laying 6 in this game against the Packers on Thursday night. Arizona's at 7-0. Green Bay at 6-1. Packers have won 6 straight since they lost that opener to New Orleans in Jacksonville. And Green Bay's been totally on fire, but now we'll see how much it affects their offense, assuming Davante Adams doesn't play. The odds makers had to move the line, but you never know. We'll see if he ends up playing coming up on Thursday night. So let's now move to the baseball. And game 1 of the World Series is tonight in Houston between the Astros and the Braves. And Houston right now laying 135 in this game. Atlanta's at plus 115 at BetMGM. And Charlie Morton against his old buddies. I mean, he wasn't in Houston for that long. But Morton's a pretty good story, though, because he started his career in Pittsburgh, and he was all right. But then he ended up going to the Astros and was with the Rays and has turned into a frontline pitcher in Major League Baseball. That you wouldn't see that often, that a guy, took him that long and he ends up, being a pretty quality pitcher. I don't know about a Cy Young pitcher, but a pretty quality pitcher. Now, Morton, so far in the playoffs, 2 earned runs he's allowed in each of his starts. But Atlanta's 0-2 in his 2 road starts in the playoffs at Milwaukee and at LA. Framber Valdez, he pitches for Houston tonight. He's turned into the ace of the staff. I mean, what'd you have in 2019? You went through Verlander and Cole and Greinke for the Astros, still lost the World Series to Washington. But now Framber Valdez is he's the guy right now. And Houston is 3-0 in his 3 playoff starts. Pitched well his last time out against the Red Sox, 8 innings, 3 hits, an earned run. But at home, he's been shaky, 7 innings pitched, 13 hits, and 7 runs in his 2 starts at Minute Maid Park against the Red Sox and the White Sox. So that's something to be concerned about coming up, assuming you're taking the Astros. But want to put up this graphic. Home teams in Game 1 of the World Series, last 11 years, 9-2. Can you guess the losers? Well, one of them was the Astros in 2019 against Washington. But the other, the Royals against the Giants back in 2014. So those are the only 2 losers among, those are the only 2 losers were the Royals and the Astros during the stretch. Even last year when the Dodgers played the Rays, even when that was the case in Houston, you still had or in Arlington rather, you still had the Dodgers win, even though it was not a home game for LA, but they were the home team in that game, and they ended up winning and ended up taking care of business against the Tampa Bay Rays and won Game 1 of that series. So home teams in Game 1, 9-2 the last 11 years, and the Astros right now, they are the favorites in the series. They are the favorites in the in Game 1, and we'll see how that one turns out between Houston and the Atlanta Braves coming up tonight. Before we get to the NBA, wanted to tell you about DraftKings. And at DraftKings, it is the Sportsbook National Championship. What is that? It's a $1 million top prize. And the tournament will be held in Weehawken, New Jersey, right outside of New York City at the Enview Hotel. And that's coming up Friday, November 5th through Sunday, November 7th. So you could check that out at DraftKings, and $1 million is up for grabs. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing to have that. And the $1 million, look, you could be the GOAT, and it's that simple. Here's the deal. $10,000 buy-in for the tournament. Players will receive a $5,000 bankroll for the weekend to use to place bets throughout the tournament by entering a $5,000 pool. You can bet on NBA, NFL, college football, all pre-match, no live betting. Okay? So that's the deal there. Sportsbook National Championship. It starts Friday, November 5th. It will end Sunday, November 7th. And that's in Weehawken, New Jersey, at the Enview Hotel right outside New York City, the Sportsbook National Championship. And that is from DraftKings. All right, let's take a look now at the NBA. And in the NBA tonight, we have 5 games. Now, before we get to the 5 games, I want to tell you about this. Look at that number. NBA road favorites are 15-4 straight up and against the spread this season. Is that amazing? 15-4. It was 12-4 going into last night. But you had 3 road favorites that won and covered. Milwaukee at Indiana. Also Boston, they outlasted Charlotte. And Chicago held off Toronto. So 15-4 straight up and against the spread for these road favorites this year in the NBA. Now tonight, you have 2 road favorites. And we'll get to those in just a second because let's go through the games now. The 76ers and the Knicks, they meet at Madison Square Garden in New York. And Philadelphia's owned New York over the years. They swept them last year. They had an overtime victory at the Garden in the third and final meeting. The first meeting was all Sixers. Knicks were competitive in the final 2. But for the Knicks, now, they're coming off a very deflating loss, to say the least, against the Orlando Magic this past Sunday night. They were 12-point favorites in that game against the Magic, and they end up losing that game. That was their first loss of the season. The Knicks had beaten the Celtics. They beat the Magic on the road, and then after that, they end up stubbing their toe against the Magic on the back end of that home-and-home this past Sunday night. So now they get the 76ers, and Philadelphia is still playing without Ben Simmons, and you have Joel Embiid's questionable tonight for Philadelphia. So Embiid questionable, and the 76ers, in spite of the fact they've owned the Knicks, they're a short dog tonight. That total is at 217. They had a lot of unders last year, 3 unders in their 3 matchups. I think the unders worth a look tonight between those 2 teams when they meet at Madison Square Garden. Philadelphia's coming off a win over Oklahoma City. They lost to Brooklyn. They won at New Orleans. So these 76ers so far 2-0 on the road this season. Now let's go to one of the road favorites tonight, that being the Golden State Warriors. They are in Oklahoma City to take on the Thunder. And the Warriors are 3-0. The Thunder are 0-3. That's not really a shock by any stretch with these two teams. Now, Golden State, maybe because who they played so far, they just beat Sacramento on Sunday night. They came back in that game. Before that, they beat the Lakers. They beat the Clippers. So those are two pretty strong wins. And then you beat Sacramento. So they own the state of California now. They beat all those teams. So they go to Oklahoma City tonight to face the Thunder. And that totals 223.5. It was at 222 a few hours ago. It moved up a few points. But Oklahoma City has totally struggled so far this season. 0-3, blown out by Houston. They had their best scoring game against Philadelphia on Sunday night. They finally topped 100 points. But this Thunder team, obviously a long way to go, and we'll see if they can get any kind of offense going in a run and gun with Golden State, which you don't want to do with Steph Curry. But the Warriors, heavy favorites tonight, laying 8.5 on the road. And this is by far their heaviest favorite spot so far of the season. The Rockets and the Mavericks, that game in Dallas tonight, and the Mavs with their home opener after they split two games against the Hawks. They're blown out in that game, and then they end up going to Toronto. They were down early in that game against Toronto Saturday night, and they end up pulling away from the Raptors to pick up their first win. So now Dallas, 10.5-point favorites against Houston, and the Rockets, they just lost to the Celtics on Sunday night. They did beat Oklahoma City. Houston's in major rebuild mode. We know that. Jalen Green, the second pick, he's a guy that's going to get a lot of opportunities for the Rockets. But Dallas, 10.5-point favorites. Houston beat them a few times last year, but that could be a little unfair considering it was a different Rockets team, and they had some healthy pieces, and still John Wall is out, and Houston's got a long way to go. But Dallas, they had an embarrassing loss in the opener against Atlanta, and at least now they saved a little bit of face winning at Toronto. So if they can beat Houston coming up tonight and cover, then they're at 2-1, and it's not the end of the world for that team. Staying in Texas, it's the Lakers and the Spurs, and that number's dropped to 2 because the main man is questionable, LeBron James. He has a sprained ankle. He was probable earlier. He's questionable now. We'll see what that means. We still got a long time to go till tip-off, 8 hours to go. But the Lakers, though, finally got in the win column by beating Memphis on Sunday night. The guy in the background there, Carmelo Anthony, he actually had a really good game for the Lakers. That turned out to be a good pickup. I mean, Russell Westbrook, there's still a lot of question marks around him, but Carmelo Anthony, if he can get going, that's a nice pickup for L.A. And the Lakers, they are 0-3 against the spread so far this season. The Spurs, actually, they've been competitive, and I know competitive feels like an insult word if you're losing. They're 1-2, but the Spurs did beat the Magic in the opener. All right, I mean, it's a care of business. That's a game you got to win. Hung with Denver, lost that game. Hung with Milwaukee, lost that game. And now they get the Lakers. And I actually had San Antonio in the opener against Orlando, seeing that gauntlet that they were facing the next three games. I mean, Denver, Milwaukee, and LA, you're the Spurs, and this is not Pop's old teams. This is a team that's maybe trying to get in the playoffs. It's not a shoo-in for the playoffs anymore. But San Antonio here, a short dog, and we'll see if LeBron ends up playing tonight or if LeBron ends up sitting out. Lakers play Oklahoma City tomorrow, so I don't really know if it's necessary he ends up coming back for Oklahoma City, even if he sits out tonight. The Nuggets and the Jazz, that game in Utah, and that's a very good matchup between these two squads who had seen each other in the playoffs before, and Jamal Murray still out for Denver. Remember, Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell went back and forth in that in those playoffs a few years ago in the bubble. But the Nuggets still have the MVP, Nikola Jokic, and Denver off a really head-scratching loss last night to Cleveland at home, 99-87. Now, here's the only good news with the Nuggets. They've allowed 98, 96, and 99 so far. Good win at Phoenix, held off San Antonio, But what in the world is this? 99-87 loss to Cleveland, who did beat Atlanta a few nights ago. The Cavs are getting there, all right? We're not going to totally trash them because they're in rebuild mode. And Evan Mobley, the rookie out of USC, he's played well. I don't know if a franchise changer or whatever you want to call it. But the Nuggets, though, second end of a back-to-back playing this Utah team, and the Jazz, they have won their first 2 games. They end up, they beat Oklahoma City. They hang on to beat Sacramento. So not great competition out of the gate. And Utah goes back on the road after this to Houston in a few days. Houston, Chicago, Milwaukee. That's the road trip for the Jazz, at least the first 3. Where Denver, they have another back-to-back coming up later in the week. Dallas at home, then at Minnesota. And Minnesota's actually been, I know they lost last night, but they're going to be better. But for Denver, they really got to get their stuff together. And getting 7 on the second end of a back-to-back, you really wonder if the Nuggets are going to struggle here again tonight against Utah or not. So that's the big question going into that game this evening. And NHL coming up tonight. What's amazing is you have 4 teams that are still unbeaten in the NHL. The Panthers, the Hurricanes, the Blues, and who was the other team I had? It was the Panthers, the Blues, the Hurricanes. Did I say them all? Panthers, Blues, Hurricanes, and there was one more that I think I'm missing here that started off undefeated. I think I'm losing my mind. I'm not too sure. But it was – I'm missing out one other team. The other team, there's 4 of them that are unbeaten. Panthers, Hurricanes, Blues, and the Oilers. Excuse me. Sorry. Don't want to miss out on the Oilers. Heaven forbid they make a run to the Stanley Cup. So, yes, you have 1 undefeated team in every division so far this season. And last night, you had Washington with a big output against Ottawa. They end up winning that game over the Senators, who have been a little more competitive. But Tampa Bay gets blasted by Buffalo. Lightning go to Pittsburgh tonight. The Panthers hold off the Coyotes. Flames, actually, they're 3-1-1. They've bounced back after they had some early struggles. The Rangers are winless at home. Rangers, so far, 4 road wins, haven't won yet at home. But Toronto's a mess. They're 2-4-1. Dallas up and down. Columbus 4-2-0. That's pretty impressive, beating the Stars last night 4-1. And St. Louis, they swept L.A., the 2 games at home. They win at 3-0, so they're 5-0-0. Tonight, inside of the NHL, you have 7 games. Lightning and Pens in Pittsburgh. That's a revenge game for Tampa Bay after losing the opener to the Pens. But also, Pittsburgh scored 3 empty net goals in that game. Calgary goes to New Jersey. And Devils are 3-1-0. That's a nice job by them. Vegas, they're all banged up. They're 1-4-0. They're heavy dogs tonight at Colorado. And the Avalanche trying to get back on track. Both those teams starting slowly. San Jose's at Nashville, and the Sharks at 4-1-0. They lost to Boston 2 days ago. The Wild and the Canucks meet in Vancouver. It's actually Vancouver's home opener tonight. They have not played yet at home. The last team that hasn't played yet at home is the Islanders because they're waiting for their arena to be all set. But the Canucks host the Wild tonight. So Minnesota went on their homestand. They won back-to-back games in overtime against the Jets and Ducks, and they got blasted by the Predators on Sunday. So now they go to Vancouver as a short favorite. The Canadiens and the Kraken in Seattle. And Montreal finally won a game the other night, beating Detroit. They were 0-5-0. Snapped their 5-game skid. Now they're a short dog against the Kraken, who are 1-4-1. Seattle lost their home opener over the weekend in Vancouver. And I don't really think it's a shock that the Kraken are not the Golden Knights from a few years ago that really took the league by storm. I mean, they wanted them to be competitive in the NHL. You don't want to bring teams in to not be competitive. but 1-4-1 is a bit of a tough start there for Seattle. Winnipeg's at Anaheim. That's a rematch from the opener. Anaheim dominated Winnipeg in that game, so the Jets favored on the road there, and Winnipeg trying to get some revenge against Anaheim coming up tonight in the NHL. BetMGM, they are the king of sportsbooks, and they present the Daily Insider. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown for new players only. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, new players only, must be 21 years or older, and it is legal in Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. So coming up tomorrow, Matt Blunt is expected to join us to talk hot and not. And this NFL card coming up on Sunday, we have three double-digit favorites. Rams over the Texans, laying 14.5 on the road. Bills minus 13.5 against the Dolphins. And the Bengals laying 10 against the Jets on the road. Who would have ever thought those words would be uttered? But Halloween, the black and orange of the Bengals, we'll see if they can keep it up at 5-2 so far in the season. And you have struggling teams listed as favorites. The 49ers against the Bears, the Seahawks against the Jags, the Broncos against Washington. They got some teams on 3+ game losing streaks favored. So kind of curious to see who's going to bounce back there. Carolina's a dog in Atlanta. Carolina's been a mess the last few weeks. You got some teams really sputtering out of control right now. So very curious to see how that all turns out coming up on Sunday. All right, so Matt Blunt will join us coming up tomorrow, and we will be with you again tomorrow at noon. So if you missed any of today's show, you can find it on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. Also, check us out at Vegas Insider on our homepage. And also want to remind you, too, that the Bet and Collect podcast that we have twice a week, Dave Sherapan, if you missed that conversation yesterday, the former odds maker and current media personality, Dave Sherapan, always fun talking to him, that he was on the Daily Insider, and that conversation's on the Bet and Collect podcast. You can find that on our homepage too, if you want to get a review of Week 7 in the NFL and Dave's thoughts on what he saw on Sunday. You can check that out. The Bet and Collect podcast, very easy to find. You can get on Spotify as well as iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Play, Spreaker. You can find it in all those locations. And please like and subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for tuning into this edition of the Daily Insider right here on Vegas Insider. And as always, best of luck with your bets.